August 1st, 1944, Normandy, France emerges beneath drifting clouds, where Allied headquarters anticipated resistance solidifying despite recent operational success. Commanders believed battlefield momentum would slow quickly, because terrain damage, exhausted units, and logistical fragility encouraged deliberate cautious movement. Planning rooms echoed with measured confidence, as officers reviewed timetables predicting incremental gains governed by supply tonnage and road capacity. The prevailing assumption held that speed created vulnerability, therefore restraint protected hard-won advantages secured since the beaches. Weeks of bocage combat shaped institutional thinking, reinforcing habits of caution born from ambushes, casualties, and painfully learned adaptation. Hedgerows had punished impatience relentlessly, convincing many leaders that aggression without preparation invited tactical humiliation. Doctrine manuals stressed consolidation phases repeatedly, outlining procedures prioritizing flank security, artillery positioning, and carefully synchronized armored movement. These texts reflected interwar theory and recent experience, favoring controlled pressure over impulsive exploitation during complex coalition warfare. Intelligence briefings portrayed German formations retreating in organized fashion, suggesting defensive elasticity rather than irreversible collapse across sectors. Analysts interpreted withdrawals conservatively, assuming enemy commanders preserved enough coherence to counterattack exposed Allied spearheads. Logistics officers emphasized port limitations, damaged railways, and fuel scarcity, reinforcing expectations that operational tempo must remain restricted. Every mile forward demanded calculated expenditure, making dramatic advances appear mathematically irresponsible rather than strategically inspired. Montgomery's staff projected weeks of deliberate pursuit, with engineers rebuilding bridges methodically while traffic controllers managed fragile road networks. Maps filled with phased arrows reflected patience, not audacity, reinforcing collective belief in an approaching slow war. Within this atmosphere, acceleration appeared reckless, bordering on insubordination, given coalition sensitivities and fragile sustainment structures. Few imagined maneuver becoming decisive, because pursuit historically punished those advancing faster than support could follow. Yet beneath conservative estimates, German morale deteriorated rapidly, command links frayed, and battlefield coherence weakened beyond Allied perception. Signals hinted desperation, although analysts dismissed implications, attributing panic to temporary exhaustion rather than systemic failure. This misreading framed expectations dangerously, creating a conceptual gap between reality and planning inside Allied headquarters. The stage was therefore prepared for astonishment, as assumptions of restraint awaited collision with unanticipated velocity. George Smith Patton's activation approached quietly, entering an environment psychologically anchored to attrition rather than movement. Few sensed that doctrine itself stood moments away from irrelevance, as motion prepared to redefine operational possibility. August 3, 1944, Normandy, France, sees Third Army units massing behind hedgerows, ready to advance with unrestrained aggression, while planners continued calculating incremental progress. Patton's philosophy of audacity rejected cautious timetables, emphasizing movement, momentum, and relentless pressure to exploit fractured German lines before they could stabilize defensively. Tank columns rumbled across damaged roads, engines roaring, as infantry followed quickly, bridging gaps, clearing villages, and ignoring traditional pause points expected by planners. Third Army's speed surpassed all previous exercises, demonstrating that doctrinal limits could be challenged without immediate disaster, provided discipline remained within operational objectives. Staff officers attempted to adjust supply chains, yet the pace of advance frequently outran the planned logistics, creating tense moments of improvisation. Patton's personal insistence on forward motion encouraged subordinate commanders to take initiative, seize objectives quickly, and maintain pressure without waiting for confirmation. Reconnaissance units penetrated enemy outposts, reporting positions ahead of maps, forcing headquarters to revise assumptions about operational reach and achievable objectives. Intelligence officers struggled to match Third Army's velocity, as positions reported every hour became obsolete almost immediately due to relentless movement. The German rear lines reacted unpredictably, with communication breakdowns preventing organized counterattacks, allowing Third Army to capture towns and crossroads faster than anticipated. Patton exploited this confusion ruthlessly, directing armored columns to bypass strongpoints, isolate enemy units, and maintain a continuous wave of pressure into the heart of northern France. Morale among American troops surged, inspired by the audacity of their commander and the tangible results of rapid conquest, bolstering willingness to endure exhaustion. Despite stretched fuel reserves and supply shortages, units continued pushing forward, displaying improvisation and cohesion that transformed potential logistical weakness into operational advantage. Eisenhower and his staff monitored the unfolding situation with disbelief, maps showing units hundreds of miles ahead of planned positions, challenging their understanding of conventional warfare. Reports indicated towns captured without expected resistance, bridges seized intact, and retreating German formations increasingly fragmented, revealing the effectiveness of Patton's unconventional emphasis on speed over consolidation. The Third Army's momentum created a cascading effect, disrupting enemy plans and forcing German commanders into reactive, improvisational decisions that failed to regain control. Patton's approach exemplified how initiative, combined with calculated risk-taking, could redefine a battlefield, demonstrating that audacious execution often produced results unattainable through cautious doctrine. By mid-August, Third Army had already covered ground considered impossible by Allied planners, leaving a trail of liberated towns, captured equipment, and stunned observers behind. This unprecedented movement signaled a shift in operational reality, proving that the combination of vision, decisiveness, and relentless action could overcome conventional expectations entirely. Communications and logistics teams adapted rapidly, improvising solutions to supply gaps, proving that organizational flexibility was as crucial as tactical brilliance in sustaining rapid advances. Every decision reinforced Patton's philosophy. Speed, audacity, and continuous motion created opportunities that cautious planning alone could never achieve on a dynamic battlefield. The German high command struggled to respond, as Third Army's unorthodox advance forced a re-evaluation of defensive priorities, leaving vital sectors exposed to exploitation. By embracing calculated risk and aggressive initiative, Patton reshaped not only terrain but also strategic thought, demonstrating that momentum itself could serve as an overwhelming force multiplier. Normandy's fields, previously imagined as obstacles, became conduits for rapid conquest, showing that terrain challenges could be overcome by audacious tactics combined with disciplined execution. Early days of Third Army's advance left both Allies and Germans questioning established doctrines, proving that the balance between risk and reward could be dramatically altered through speed. This campaign marked a turning point in operational thinking, illustrating that bold leadership, relentless pressure, and rapid maneuvering could redefine the boundaries of what was considered militarily achievable. Patton's methods, though unconventional and audacious, forced commanders on both sides to recognize that velocity, initiative, and decisive action could dictate the course of entire campaigns. August 5, 1944, Northern France, Third Army continued its relentless advance, leaving behind traditional doctrines that emphasized caution, consolidation, and meticulously planned operations. Patton's philosophy rejected incremental progress, transforming speed from a tactical choice into the primary strategy, forcing staff and subordinate commanders to adapt or fall behind the momentum. Maps became provisional tools rather than strict guides, as units seized objectives faster than headquarters could process intelligence, creating a fluid operational reality. Tank columns bypassed strong points, engineers improvised crossings, and infantry exploited gaps, demonstrating that audacity could replace strict adherence to doctrine without immediate catastrophic consequences. Planners struggled to reconcile logistics with movement, as supply convoys lagged behind rapidly advancing spearheads, creating tension between theoretical planning and practical execution. Patton's insistence on forward motion demanded improvisation at every level, showing that organizational flexibility could sustain operations even under unprecedented speed. Communication lines became stretched thin, forcing commanders to rely on initiative and trust, abandoning rigid hierarchies while maintaining operational cohesion across dispersed units. Every decision, from bridge repair to village occupation, became a test of judgment rather than adherence to pre-existing manuals or doctrinal expectations. The German defensive structure, expecting predictable advances, found itself constantly outmaneuvered, revealing that speed itself could be more destructive than massed firepower and disrupting cohesion. By moving faster than reaction times allowed, Third Army forced enemy units into piecemeal responses, often surrendering or retreating without organized resistance. Patton's strategy blurred the line between operational daring and calculated risk, transforming speed into a weapon capable of collapsing conventional defenses. Officers observed that velocity dictated engagement outcomes more reliably than sheer numbers, with initiative becoming as lethal as artillery or armor in influencing battle results. Eisenhower monitored progress in disbelief, noting that standard operational tables could not anticipate the distances achieved daily, forcing strategic recalibration across headquarters and allied commands. Third Army's advance created a domino effect, enabling follow-on forces to exploit newly liberated corridors and rendering traditional pause points obsolete, reshaping the entire campaign plan. Unit morale soared under the doctrine of motion, as success reinforced bold decision-making, encouraging soldiers to endure fatigue, confusion, and logistical strain with confidence in leadership. Patton's methods proved that audacity, combined with disciplined execution, could maintain cohesion despite abandonment of established procedures, challenging the fundamental assumptions of modern warfare. German commanders struggled to respond to unpredictable movements, as velocity substituted for massed formations, demonstrating that speed could achieve effects normally requiring concentrated manpower. Strategic thinking shifted from static defense to reactive improvisation, highlighting how the abandonment of doctrine imposed psychological pressure on adversaries, while amplifying operational reach. Every captured town, secured road, or bridge crossing reinforced the perception that speed had become the primary determinant of battlefield advantage, rather than attritional engagement. Patton's audacious maneuvers illustrated that abandoning doctrine did not imply recklessness but required disciplined execution, demonstrating a revolutionary approach to operational warfare across northern France. Rapid movement redefined intelligence priorities, as real-time reporting, flexible decision-making, and decentralized command replaced rigid adherence to maps and pre-planned objectives. By transforming speed into strategy, Third Army created an operational tempo that not only challenged enemies but also forced allies to reconsider conventional limitations of planning. The campaign became a demonstration that velocity itself could shape outcomes, disrupt enemy coordination, and impose psychological strain beyond the measurable effects of firepower. Doctrine, once a stabilizing framework, now yielded to initiative, improvisation, and audacity, proving that leadership and momentum could override assumptions of controlled, methodical progression. August 6, 1944, Northern France. German commanders awoke to reports of Third Army units advancing far faster than anticipated, creating immediate disarray across multiple sectors. Communications were fragmented, radio messages delayed, and field reports contradicted each other, forcing officers to make decisions without a clear understanding of enemy intentions or positions. Frontline units struggled to maintain cohesion, as panicked withdrawals collided with reinforcements attempting to stabilize faltering lines, producing localized chaos across Normandy's northern flanks. Orders from higher command often arrived too late, with units already repositioned, highlighting the inability of traditional hierarchical structures to respond to unprecedented velocity. Division headquarters attempted to regroup retreating formations, yet confusion spread as reports of captured towns, missing supply trains, and abandoned artillery challenged situational awareness. German soldiers, conditioned to expect methodical Allied advances, found themselves reacting instead of executing plans, eroding morale and undermining confidence in leadership. Commanders attempted counterattacks, but dispersed units lacked coordination, and armored divisions often arrived after positions had already fallen, rendering offensive efforts ineffective. The speed of Third Army prevented concentrated resistance, leaving commanders improvising responses while maintaining the appearance of control to higher authorities. Intelligence officers struggled to reconcile conflicting reports, often overestimating strength in some sectors while underestimating the operational reach of Patton's formations, worsening decision-making at multiple levels. Fragmentation of the command chain allowed lower-ranking officers to make autonomous choices, sometimes effective, but often producing further disjointed maneuvers across the battlefield. German logistical networks failed under pressure, as fuel depots, roadways, and rail lines were overrun, denying commanders the ability to redeploy forces efficiently or reinforce key positions. Supply shortages compounded confusion, with units unable to maintain mobility or sustain firepower. creating gaps in defensive lines rapidly exploited by advancing American forces. Enemy morale deteriorated visibly, with troops abandoning posts and surrendering in small pockets, unable to reconcile orders from fractured command with the reality of advancing Third Army units. Reports of bypassed towns and isolated positions fueled rumors of catastrophic collapse, further undermining cohesion and accelerating operational breakdown across multiple sectors simultaneously. High Command attempted to centralize control, issuing directives to regroup, counterattack, or defend, but delayed execution allowed Third Army to dictate the tempo, preventing meaningful response. The German leadership's inability to react quickly transformed strategic expectation into tactical desperation, revealing structural vulnerabilities in a military designed for methodical, disciplined engagement rather than rapid disruption. Every miscommunication amplified the effect of Third Army's relentless movement, producing cascading failures in coordination, rendering once formidable divisions ineffective under pressure from audacious maneuvers. The disintegration of command unity emphasized that speed and initiative could exploit not only physical positions but also organizational weaknesses, demonstrating the psychological as well as operational impact of Patton's strategy. By mid-August, German forces faced fragmentation at multiple levels, with field commanders forced to improvise continuously, leaving strategic cohesion largely absent from northern France's contested areas. The confusion underscored how operational tempo could destabilize an enemy far more effectively than attritional combat, turning organizational rigidity into a liability against an unpredictable, rapid opponent. Every fractured decision, misdirected order, and delayed movement illustrated the profound vulnerability of command structures unprepared for velocity, highlighting how Patton's audacious methods reshaped battlefield logic entirely. German units struggled to react cohesively, proving that speed, audacity, and relentless execution could dismantle not only positions but entire command frameworks in modern warfare. August 8, 1944, Northern France, Third Army surged forward, moving faster than any logistical framework could reliably support, creating tension between operational momentum and supply limitations. Fuel depots lagged behind armored columns, forcing commanders to make difficult decisions between advancing rapidly and risking immobilization versus pausing to resupply adequately. Convoys struggled along damaged roads, slowed by debris, congestion, and constant movement, as engineers raced to repair bridges and clear obstacles obstructing the relentless advance. Tank units occasionally halted on narrow routes, awaiting fuel, while infantry carried on, demonstrating improvisation that allowed momentum to continue despite fragile logistical support. Patton personally prioritized velocity, instructing units to draw fuel from captured depots or redistribute supplies between formations to prevent halts, reinforcing a culture of adaptive problem-solving. The gamble rested on judgment calls at multiple levels, as each decision weighed immediate operational advantage against the risk of stranded columns far from support. Commanders constantly calculated consumption rates, rationing fuel to ensure spearheads could maintain pressure while minimizing interruptions. Balancing audacity with practical necessity, maintenance teams worked around the clock, improvising repairs in the field to sustain tanks, trucks, and artillery, preventing mechanical failures from disrupting the carefully orchestrated advance. Supply officers established forward refueling points using captured resources, often in towns barely secured, taking considerable risk to keep forces moving at unprecedented speed. This approach relied on initiative at lower levels, with junior officers making rapid decisions in dynamic environments, illustrating how logistics adapted to operational demands rather than dictating them. Enemy forces recognized the vulnerability, attempting ambushes and interdictions along supply routes. Yet Third Army's rapid movement and adaptive logistics often negated these threats before they could materialize. Every captured fuel depot or vehicle repair station became critical, transforming minor acquisitions into decisive enablers of sustained momentum across long distances. The psychological impact on troops was significant, as confidence grew when improvisation succeeded, reinforcing the belief that audacious advances could overcome supply limitations without catastrophic risk. Conversely, moments of near depletion emphasized the precarious nature of the campaign, illustrating the thin line between triumph and immobilization in high-speed operations. Eisenhower monitored reports closely, aware that Third Army's pace challenged conventional planning assumptions, yet willing to allow calculated risk due to the extraordinary tactical opportunities. created. Strategists debated the balance between speed and sustainability, recognizing that while momentum yielded strategic surprise, it required constant vigilance and exceptional coordination to avoid collapse. By mid-August, the operational gamble had proven effective. As Third Army advanced hundreds of miles, capturing key towns, crossroads, and supply points, while improvisation kept units fueled despite stretched lines. The campaign demonstrated that calculated risk, adaptive logistics, and disciplined improvisation could sustain extraordinary tempo, highlighting the interplay between audacity and practical resource management in modern warfare. Every mile gained reflected both daring command decisions and logistical ingenuity, showing that mobility could become a weapon only if supply challenges were anticipated and mitigated creatively. Patton's gamble underscored a revolutionary principle. Momentum itself could drive operations, but only through constant balancing of risk, resource management, and rapid problem-solving under extreme conditions. The interplay of fuel and motion reshaped the campaign, proving that audacious advances, supported by flexible logistics, could outpace conventional planning and force enemy disarray across vast terrain. Success highlighted the symbiotic relationship between operational daring and supply adaptability, revealing that modern warfare required both speed and resourcefulness to exploit fleeting opportunities fully. August 10, 1944, Allied headquarters near Bayeux, France. Found Eisenhower studying maps with mounting disbelief as Third Army's reported positions advanced far beyond expectations. Planners struggled to reconcile reality with projections, realizing that Patton's relentless momentum was rendering carefully calculated timetables obsolete almost immediately. Reports arrived hourly, each updating locations hundreds of miles ahead, forcing staff officers to redraw operational charts and question assumptions about enemy resistance. The speed of advance created both exhilaration and concern, as the thin line between success and overextension became increasingly apparent in command discussions. Eisenhower reportedly muttered under his breath, "Good God, he's already there," capturing the shock that no map or estimate could fully convey. His reaction reflected not only surprise but also the profound implications of rapid movement on coalition coordination and strategic planning. Allied communications teams scrambled to track units, attempting to maintain control over supply allocation, artillery coordination, and follow-on operations across the newly liberated terrain. Headquarters found itself reacting to reports rather than issuing directives, a reversal of traditional command flow that challenged the conventional understanding of operational management. Subordinate commanders exercised unprecedented autonomy, empowered by Patton's philosophy, while Eisenhower's staff sought ways to integrate momentum into broader strategic objectives without stifling initiative. Decisions that would normally require approval were now executed locally, highlighting how operational tempo could shift authority forward along the chain of command. Enemy positions collapsed faster than predicted, leaving gaps that required immediate exploitation to maintain the initiative and prevent German forces from regrouping defensively. Eisenhower recognized that Third Army's audacity imposed a new reality, one in which speed dictated the unfolding operational map rather than meticulous planning tables. Planning meetings became improvisational exercises, as staff officers debated priority targets, supply needs, and follow-on operations while maps continually changed beneath their eyes. Fluidity of positions emphasized that control could no longer remain centralized, and command required both flexibility and rapid response to emerging opportunities. Psychological pressure mounted within headquarters, as the visible difference between anticipated and actual positions reminded leadership of the potential risks of overextension. Eisenhower weighed the benefits of rapid exploitation against the dangers of isolated columns, understanding that Third Army's boldness both threatened and strengthened overall campaign objectives. Operational reports highlighted liberated towns, captured bridges, and disoriented enemy units, illustrating how speed reshaped the battlefield while challenging traditional, Allied methods of coordination and control. Each update reinforced the need to trust subordinate judgment, as forward commanders acted decisively in conditions too dynamic for centralized micromanagement. By mid-August, Allied command recognized that control had partially shifted forward, with Patton dictating tempo, objectives, and engagement sequence through relentless motion rather than formal directives. The unfolding campaign demonstrated that initiative, rapid movement, and audacity could supplement centralized strategy, compelling senior leaders to adapt their role from commander to facilitator of momentum. Maps themselves became symbolic artifacts, representing potential rather than reality, as Third Army's pace continuously outstripped static representations of terrain and enemy disposition. Eisenhower's experience highlighted the challenge of commanding modern forces in motion, where operational control required trust, flexibility, and the acceptance that audacity sometimes exceeded planning. August 12, 1944, Northern France. German rear positions began collapsing under relentless pressure from Third Army units advancing at unprecedented speed, leaving towns abandoned without formal orders. Local commanders, overwhelmed by rapidly changing situations, often fled or surrendered, unable to organize coherent resistance in the face of Patton's aggressive maneuvers. Communications between units failed entirely, as radios, couriers, and signal stations could not keep pace with the rapidly shifting front lines across the countryside. Reports of occupied villages, captured crossroads, and isolated garrisons reached high command too late, creating widespread uncertainty and panic among German planners. Supply depots were overrun, ammunition lost, and vehicles abandoned as Third Army's momentum denied the enemy time to withdraw or reorganize effectively. These setbacks amplified disorder, leaving remaining units fragmented, understrength, and increasingly incapable of mounting coordinated defensive actions in northern France. Town after town fell almost effortlessly, with minimal resistance, demonstrating that operational velocity could achieve psychological as well as territorial advantage over disoriented forces. Soldiers on both sides recognized the speed of Third Army as extraordinary, and German troops began surrendering preemptively, fearing encirclement or annihilation. Artillery units, cut off from headquarters, were abandoned or destroyed to prevent capture, further weakening the German ability to contest movement along critical supply routes. Patton's forces exploited these gaps with mechanized speed, seizing bridges, crossroads, and river crossings before Germans could establish fallback positions or defensive lines. Local civilians observed rapid transitions of authority, as American troops moved in quickly, occupying towns before German command could direct organized withdrawal. These occupations created logistical and administrative challenges for Third Army, yet reinforced operational momentum and prevented enemy recovery or counteroffensive action in multiple sectors simultaneously. German High Command issued frantic orders to regroup, but fragmented reports, miscommunication, and unit dispersal rendered coordination nearly impossible. Leaving many formations isolated or surrendered without fighting, the collapse of the rear forced strategic re-evaluation, as operational assumptions about German resilience proved outdated against Patton's combination of speed, initiative, and aggressive exploitation. Resistance increasingly became symbolic, with small pockets fighting briefly before capitulating, while entire divisions retreated in disarray toward interior regions of France. The psychological impact of rapid occupation amplified tactical gains, eroding confidence in leadership and reducing the will to fight even in theoretically defensible positions. By mid-August, the German rear had effectively ceased functioning as an organized defensive structure, leaving key roads, towns, and supply hubs under American control almost automatically. Third Army's advance demonstrated that mobility, audacity, and operational tempo could render conventional defense meaningless, forcing enemy surrender without traditional engagements or protracted combat. Strategists noted that momentum alone reshaped the battlefield, with speed dictating which positions were viable and which were lost automatically, highlighting a fundamental shift in operational doctrine. The fall of towns without orders underscored Patton's ability to exploit confusion, showing that rapid, decisive movement could collapse the enemy's operational framework even without direct confrontation. Every liberated town reinforced the lesson that velocity, initiative, and relentless pressure could substitute for overwhelming firepower, leaving enemy units scattered, demoralized, and strategically impotent. Third Army's effectiveness relied as much on psychological dominance as physical conquest, demonstrating that operational tempo could achieve objectives impossible through conventional, methodical approaches. August 14, 1944, Northern France. Allied command grew increasingly alarmed at Third Army's unprecedented speed, recognizing that rapid success introduced new operational dangers alongside strategic gains. Planners feared that outrunning supply lines and overextending flanks could leave armored spearheads vulnerable, even as liberated towns bolstered morale and disrupted German defenses. Reports indicated units were hundreds of miles ahead of projected positions, forcing headquarters to rethink coordination with follow-on forces and adjacent armies. The pace created challenges in artillery support, medical evacuation, and communication, as planners scrambled to reconcile operational ambition with logistical reality. Patton's advance risked creating gaps between units, leaving isolated columns potentially exposed to counterattack, ambush, or encirclement if the enemy managed to regroup quickly. Commanders debated whether to restrain momentum or exploit disarray, balancing audacity against the possibility that speed itself could become a vulnerability. Air support faced difficulties keeping up with fast-moving columns, with resupply drops and reconnaissance missions often arriving after the units had already passed. This mismatch forced improvisation, relying on initiative at lower levels, while staff officers attempted to coordinate firepower and movement across rapidly changing terrain. Allied intelligence worried that overextension might allow German reserves to concentrate against vulnerable points, risking localized disasters despite widespread operational gains. Maps became symbolic rather than practical, as positions shifted daily, creating uncertainty about which units required reinforcement, resupply, or withdrawal to maintain cohesion. Despite these risks, morale soared among troops, inspired by audacious victories, captured towns, and the perception that Third Army's momentum made German resistance almost irrelevant. Commanders recognized that psychological dominance could offset vulnerabilities, as enemy units frequently surrendered or withdrew preemptively, reducing the immediate threat of concentrated counterattacks. High-level discussions weighed speed against sustainability, acknowledging that every mile gained without secure supply lines represented both opportunity and peril for overall campaign stability. Eisenhower and his staff monitored Third Army closely, understanding that rapid success forced constant re-evaluation of strategic objectives, timing of follow-on forces, and coordination with neighboring armies. Patton's risk-taking created operational dilemmas, as allies attempted to maintain overall cohesion while accommodating independent decision-making that accelerated tempo but complicated planning. Every decision to push forward carried potential rewards in territory and disruption, balanced against the inherent danger of stretching formations beyond manageable support, exposing critical flanks to unforeseen threats. Observers noted that the unconventional nature of the advance challenged traditional assumptions about operational limits, highlighting how audacity could simultaneously create advantage and uncertainty on multiple levels. Third Army's successes forced allies to adapt planning, emphasizing flexibility and contingency rather than strict adherence to original timetables, demonstrating that victory itself carried embedded risks requiring constant vigilance. Commanders worked feverishly to adjust supply routes, coordination, and reinforcements to match speed, highlighting the tension between the thrill of rapid advance and the realities of operational sustainability. This dynamic illustrated that even extraordinary success could produce hazards, requiring constant oversight, innovative thinking, and acceptance that momentum could generate both triumph and potential catastrophe. By mid-August, Allies recognized that Third Army's pace redefined operational norms, creating a paradox where audacity and achievement demanded heightened caution to prevent strategic overreach. Patton's advance revealed that modern warfare required balance in speed and initiative against logistical limits and command control, proving that success itself could generate unforeseen operational dangers. August 16, 1944, Northern France. Third Army operated on a narrow operational edge, where brilliant maneuvers balanced precariously against the risk of disaster. As columns advanced faster than planners could sustain, Patton's decisions demanded rapid judgment, improvisation, and trust in subordinate commanders, leaving little margin for error across exposed flanks and stretched supply lines. Bridges captured intact became both opportunities and liabilities, as rapid exploitation risked overextension into areas vulnerable to counterattack or mechanical failure. Commanders calculated fuel consumption, unit cohesion, and enemy disposition simultaneously, understanding that one misstep could strand spearheads far ahead of support elements. Engineers worked under pressure to repair roads and rivers crossings while armored divisions pushed forward. A delicate balance between speed and structural limitations, the pace forced reliance on local initiative, as communication delays meant units often acted autonomously, creating both flexibility and potential for miscoordination. Enemy forces, though fragmented, occasionally mounted desperate attacks on isolated units, demonstrating that operational brilliance constantly flirted with catastrophic consequences if timing failed. Patton's philosophy encouraged calculated risk, trusting that audacity, speed, and cohesion would outweigh potential pitfalls inherent in pushing beyond doctrinal norms. Weather, terrain, and mechanical failure all threatened to derail momentum, requiring contingency planning that relied heavily on adaptability rather than fixed procedures. Every mile gained exposed gaps, but also widened opportunities to exploit enemy disarray, showing that the same actions could generate either disaster or decisive advantage. Staff officers calculated reinforcement priorities, supply allocations, and artillery support with constant revisions, highlighting the tension between meticulous planning and unpredictable operational tempo. Maps updated hourly often failed to reflect reality, forcing leaders to base critical decisions on intuition, reports, and projections rather than fixed schedules. The psychological strain on both troops and commanders intensified, as exhaustion, uncertainty, and the awareness of potential overreach tested discipline and cohesion continuously. Yet confidence grew in units, accustomed to rapid successes, demonstrating that repeated audacious maneuvers could build resilience even while operating on the edge of failure. Eisenhower observed from headquarters, noting that Third Army's audacity achieved results impossible under conventional timelines, yet carried inherent risks that could not be ignored by coalition planners. The juxtaposition of brilliance and danger defined the campaign, illustrating that operational mastery often existed alongside vulnerability when speed became the dominant factor in decision-making. Tactical ingenuity allowed bypassed enemy formations to be neutralized indirectly, but reliance on initiative meant that errors could multiply if communication or judgment faltered. Every successful maneuver reinforced the perception that risk, when calculated and executed decisively, could produce advantages disproportionate to conventional expectations of force or preparation. By mid-August, the narrow operational edge became both a symbol and a reality, demonstrating that modern warfare demanded balancing audacity with caution, and that exceptional results often required flirting with danger. Patton's advance showed that operational brilliance, when coupled with disciplined initiative, could overcome doctrinal constraints while continuously challenging the limits of control, supply, and human endurance. Success and peril existed simultaneously, with every mile forward representing both victory and the ever-present possibility of disaster, highlighting the razor-thin line separating audacious triumph from operational collapse. The campaign revealed that leadership, judgment, and relentless momentum were decisive, proving that brilliance in motion inherently involved constant risk, uncertainty, and the ever-present flirtation with disaster. August 20, 1944, Northern France. Third Army's relentless advance left an indelible mark on the campaign, demonstrating that audacity, speed, and initiative could reshape operational reality far beyond traditional expectations. Patton's philosophy of motion became both a tactical instrument and a strategic statement, redefining how Allied forces perceived possibility in modern warfare. The liberated towns bore witness to both triumph and destruction, as rapid movement often left infrastructure damaged, civilians disoriented, and logistical challenges unresolved. Yet the psychological impact of liberation, coupled with the collapse of German resistance, underscored that momentum itself could achieve political and military outcomes simultaneously. Casualties, though lower than anticipated in direct engagements, reflected the human cost of continuous exertion, exposure, and the strain of operating at maximum operational tempo. Soldiers endured extreme fatigue, improvising under relentless pressure, demonstrating that human endurance was as critical as machinery and planning in sustaining rapid operations. Supply lines remained fragile, constantly challenged by distance, enemy interdiction, and terrain, yet adaptability and improvisation mitigated potential disasters, highlighting lessons for future high-speed campaigns. The balance between audacity and sustainability became a central theme, illustrating that operational brilliance required both boldness and practical resource management to avoid catastrophic collapse. Eisenhower and Allied commanders recognized that Patton's methods forced a reconsideration of doctrine, showing that velocity could dictate both opportunity and constraint in dynamic combat environments. Psychological shock inflicted on German forces revealed that initiative, speed, and surprise could achieve effects exceeding the scale of material firepower alone. Strategic lessons emerged, emphasizing the importance of decentralized command, rapid decision-making, and trust in subordinate judgment as essential complements to aggressive operational planning. Third, Army's advance became a case study in how leadership, audacity, and momentum could compensate for numerical or logistical limitations while exploiting enemy vulnerabilities comprehensively. Towns and crossroads captured ahead of schedule facilitated subsequent operations, demonstrating that speed could shape broader campaign outcomes by dictating the tempo of both Allied and enemy movements. Patton's operational style created a ripple effect, compelling neighboring commands to adjust plans and reinforcing the principle that momentum, once established, could redefine entire theaters of combat. The campaign's success carried inherent risk, and historians acknowledge that excessive speed could have led to disaster had mechanical failures, enemy counterattacks, or misjudgments occurred at critical moments. This duality highlights the delicate balance between audacity and vulnerability, proving that leadership and decision-making under uncertainty define the ultimate consequences of rapid operational execution. By late August, Third Army's motion had reshaped northern France, accelerating liberation while forcing German forces into retreat, surrender, and strategic disarray, confirming the decisive effect of speed on campaign dynamics. The lessons of this advance influenced doctrine, training, and future operations, emphasizing that mobility, initiative, and relentless pressure could dictate outcomes more than attritional combat alone. Patton's legacy became synonymous with audacity in motion, demonstrating that brilliance required risk, that speed could substitute for mass, and that momentum itself could become a decisive instrument of war. The human cost, logistical strain, and command challenges underscored that such advances demanded exceptional judgment, preparation, and resilience, proving that extraordinary operational success carries enduring consequences for all involved. The Third Army's achievements demonstrated that operational tempo could shape strategy, psychology, and logistics simultaneously, leaving an enduring example of how relentless motion can define both victory and historical legacy. Patton's campaign illustrated that triumph and danger are inseparable when audacity dictates movement, and that the consequences of relentless advance resonate far beyond immediate tactical results.